It was the kind of day that Aron Ralston had often dreamed about, a solitary adventure in the heart of Utah's vast wilderness. It was April 26, 2003, and Ralston, a 27-year-old experienced outdoorsman, had set out for a solo hike in Bluejohn Canyon, an isolated and rugged area in southeastern Utah. He was no stranger to the harsh landscapes of the American Southwest. In fact, it was the wild, untamed nature of the region that had drawn him in time and time again. The towering sandstone formations, deep narrow canyons, and the harsh beauty of the desert had been his playground for years. To Aron, there was no greater feeling than the freedom of being out in nature, pushing his limits. His plan for the day was simple: venture through the maze of narrow canyons, enjoy the solitude, and explore some of the remote sections he hadn't yet encountered. He was well prepared. As he packed his gear before heading into the canyon, Ralston made sure he had everything he needed: enough water, a few snacks, and the basics for a day trip. He didn't think he needed more. After all, he had hiked these types of areas before, and nothing about Bluejohn Canyon felt unusual. It was another adventure in a long list of solo expeditions. Little did he know, this journey would push him to the edge of his physical and mental endurance, testing the very limits of human survival. The canyon itself was breathtaking, a labyrinth of narrow passageways and deep, winding gorges that made it both beautiful and dangerous. The sun beat down relentlessly, casting shadows that made the walls of the canyon appear even more imposing. Ralston moved confidently through the landscape, scrambling over boulders and navigating through the tight, winding passages. He was used to these conditions, feeling the rush of adrenaline and the satisfaction of being in his element. But something about this particular section of the canyon caught his attention. It was a place that seemed so familiar, yet now, it would forever be etched in his memory for the wrong reasons. At around 1:30 p.m., Ralston made his way down into a narrow slot canyon, a section where the canyon wall seemed to close in on him, forcing him to slip and squeeze through narrow gaps. He had navigated through this kind of terrain before, but this time, as he descended into a deeper section of the canyon, something went terribly wrong. In an instant, his left foot slipped on the uneven surface, sending him crashing toward the canyon floor. In a desperate attempt to steady himself, he reached out with both hands, but as his left hand grasped the jagged rock, a massive boulder, dislodged from its precarious resting place, tumbled down toward him. The weight of the rock, estimated at around 800 pounds, struck with brutal force, pinning Ralston's right arm against the canyon wall. The sound of the boulder crashing into the canyon floor echoed through the narrow space, but the physical reality of what had happened hit Ralston like a freight train. He was trapped. His arm was wedged tightly between the rock and the canyon wall, his body twisted in such a way that there was no possible way to move. He tried to shift the rock with his legs, pushing against it with all his might, but the boulder didn't budge. Panic flooded his mind as he realized just how alone he was. No one would come to help him. His cell phone was useless in this remote part of the canyon, and no one knew where he was. Ralston's initial reaction was disbelief. He tried to pull his arm free, wriggling his body, trying to wedge himself out of the tight, cramped space. The rock remained immovable. His arm was stuck, trapped beneath the sheer weight of the boulder. And then, as the minutes ticked by, the first true wave of fear hit him. What if he couldn't get out? What if no one found him? Hours passed slowly as Ralston continued to struggle. With each passing minute, his situation grew more dire. His arm was pinned in such a way that blood flow was restricted, and he could feel the throbbing ache of it slowly going numb. The weight of the boulder seemed to press down harder, and his strength began to ebb away as he exhausted himself trying to free himself. But no matter how much he pulled or twisted, the boulder wouldn't budge. Ralston knew the severity of his situation. The rock was cutting off circulation to his arm. He could feel the tingling sensation of his arm going numb, and he understood that without blood flow, the chances of saving his arm, let alone surviving, were growing slimmer with each passing hour. His water supply was dwindling, and though he had a small amount of food, he knew he had to be judicious. In this remote corner of the canyon, there was no one to hear his cries for help. The first night trapped in the canyon was the longest of his life. As the sun set and the temperature dropped, Ralston was forced to confront the terrifying reality of his situation. He was alone in the wilderness, his arm crushed under a massive boulder, and no immediate hope of rescue. The darkness of the canyon seemed to swallow him whole, and in that silence, his mind raced. He needed to act, but he wasn't sure how. His options were running out. The physical pain from the pressure on his arm grew sharper, but the emotional toll was far more intense. Every moment that passed felt like a countdown, and the fear that he might not make it out alive settled deep in his bones. He thought of his family, his friends, and the life he had lived up until this moment. This was supposed to be just another adventure, another solo trek into the wild, another challenge to overcome. But now, the wilderness felt more like a trap. It wasn't just the isolation that threatened his survival, but the relentless pressure that threatened to crush both his body and his spirit. As the hours passed, Ralston realized something that would change the course of his fate. If he wanted to survive, he had to be willing to do something drastic, something beyond the limits of what he ever thought possible. By the second day of his entrapment, Aron Ralston's situation had reached a critical point. His arm, still pinned beneath the massive boulder, was growing numb. His body had begun to dehydrate, and his strength was rapidly diminishing. The isolation in Bluejohn Canyon felt absolute, with no sign of anyone coming to his rescue. Ralston had realized that he was in a life-or-death struggle, and as the hours turned into days, he faced the grim reality: if he didn't act decisively, he would not survive. Ralston had already exhausted his physical strength attempting to move the boulder or free his arm. He had tried every possible maneuver, pushing with his legs, shifting his body, and wriggling his arm, but all had proven ineffective. The rock, weighing approximately 800 pounds, was simply too heavy for him to lift or shift on his own. The pressure on his arm had caused severe damage, cutting off circulation and leading to swelling. His physical condition was deteriorating, but his mind remained alert. With no clear way out and the threat of permanent injury to his arm growing ever more likely, Ralston realized that his only chance for survival would involve a drastic and extreme measure. He considered his options: continue waiting for rescue, which seemed increasingly unlikely, or take matters into his own hands. His knowledge of survival and his deep will to live led him to the painful conclusion that he had to amputate his own arm to free himself from the boulder. Ralston was well aware of the risks involved. Amputating his arm would require immense physical effort and would likely lead to severe blood loss and infection. He had no medical training, no proper tools, and only a dull, small multi-tool knife. It seemed impossible, but it was the only option left. His survival instincts, honed through years of outdoor experience, kicked into high gear. He knew that hesitation would only make matters worse. After careful consideration, he made the harrowing decision to begin the process of self-amputation. Using his small, dull knife, he started the painstakingly difficult task of cutting through the tissue and bone of his arm. The pain was excruciating, but Ralston, driven by the need to survive, endured it. He later described the process as one of both physical and mental endurance, with every cut taking him further from the safety of his previous life and closer to a future that he was determined to reach. The work was slow and grueling, but Ralston's determination remained unwavering. The knife was not designed for such an extreme task, and the process of cutting through bone was tedious and painful. Ralston had to shift his focus away from the overwhelming pain, concentrating instead on the goal of survival. As he continued cutting, his mind remained sharp, calculating each movement, determining how to proceed in the most effective way possible. At one point, he realized that the only way to complete the amputation would be to break the bone in his arm. He used his body weight to snap the bone, and with that, he was able to complete the procedure. The task took over 6 hours to complete. By the time Ralston had amputated his arm and freed himself from the boulder, he was physically drained, disoriented, and in significant pain. Yet, against all odds, he had survived. Ralston had endured what few people could even fathom, an act of extreme self-sacrifice driven by the instinct to live. With his arm severed, Ralston still faced a daunting journey to safety. Despite the traumatic injury, he knew that his fight for survival was not over. He had to navigate out of the canyon and find help. Using the remaining strength he had, he began to descend the canyon wall, making his way toward the trailhead. He was weak, dizzy, and losing blood, but his survival instincts kept him moving. Eventually, after several hours of grueling effort, he encountered a family of hikers who helped him to safety. They called for help, and he was airlifted to a nearby hospital, where he received medical attention for his injuries. Aron Ralston's story of survival became a symbol of the strength of the human spirit. His decision to amputate his own arm, while extreme, showcased his remarkable will to live. It was a decision that ultimately saved his life but also left him forever marked by the experience. Ralston's story would go on to inspire countless others to examine their own resilience and their ability to face extreme adversity. His experience is a testament to the power of human determination and survival. When Aron Ralston was finally rescued and flown to safety, the physical and emotional toll of his incredible ordeal was far from over. His fight for survival had ended, but the recovery process, both for his body and his psyche, was just beginning. After enduring the trauma of amputation and living through 5 days of isolation and despair, Ralston faced a new challenge: how to move forward with his life. Ralston's self-amputation was an act of unimaginable courage, and the scars left on his body and mind would remain for the rest of his life. In the immediate aftermath, doctors at the hospital treated him for severe blood loss, dehydration, and the psychological trauma of the experience. His right arm, which had been severed below the elbow, would be fitted with a prosthetic, but the road to physical recovery was a long and painful one. More than just the physical scars, the psychological toll of the event weighed heavily on Ralston. At first, Ralston struggled to reconcile the man he was before the ordeal and the person who had survived such an unimaginable experience. He often described the trauma as something that left him feeling disconnected from the world around him. The act of amputating his own arm had not only saved his life, but it also altered his identity. Ralston had been forced to confront his own mortality in the most extreme way possible, and that experience fundamentally changed the way he viewed life, survival, and the human spirit. Yet, through all the pain and hardship, Ralston found strength. He came to terms with what he had done not out of desperation, but out of a sheer will to survive. In interviews after the incident, he shared that the choice to amputate his arm was not one made hastily or without deep thought. It was an act that allowed him to survive, and it became a symbol of the human capacity for resilience when faced with dire circumstances. In the years following his survival, Ralston became an inspiration for many. His story was widely publicized, first through media interviews, and then in his memoir, Between a Rock and a Hard Place, published in 2004. The book detailed his harrowing experience in Bluejohn Canyon and offered an intimate look at the mental and emotional journey that led him to his fateful decision. The book resonated with readers around the world, many of whom were struck by the strength of his character and his unflinching willingness to confront fear head-on. The public's fascination with Ralston's survival story only grew when 127 Hours, a film directed by Danny Boyle, was released in 2010. The movie, based on Ralston's memoir, depicted his traumatic experience in intense detail, showcasing his time trapped under the boulder, the physical and emotional pain he endured, and the life-altering decision to amputate his arm. James Franco portrayed Ralston in the film, earning widespread critical acclaim for his portrayal of the real-life hero. The film not only introduced Ralston's story to a global audience but also provided a cinematic exploration of the depths of human survival. Through the book and the film, Ralston's story became a symbol of perseverance and courage. People around the world were inspired by his unyielding determination to survive against all odds. His story became a powerful reminder that survival is not just about physical strength, it is about mental resilience, the will to keep going even when faced with overwhelming adversity. Ralston's ability to stay focused, keep moving, and make the difficult decisions necessary for his survival became a metaphor for overcoming any obstacle in life, no matter how daunting it may seem. Beyond the film and media coverage, Ralston's survival story had a broader impact. He became a sought-after motivational speaker, sharing his experience with audiences across the world. His speeches were not just about the physical aspects of survival but about the mental toughness required to overcome life's challenges. He spoke about the importance of resilience, the power of human will, and how facing adversity head-on can shape a person's character in ways that are unimaginable before the struggle. His story became a testament to the human capacity to adapt, endure, and ultimately triumph in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. Ralston's journey also sparked important discussions about risk-taking, self-reliance, and survival tactics. His decision to go on a solo adventure, without telling anyone his plans, was a decision that many questioned in hindsight. In interviews, Ralston admitted that in the future, he would have done things differently. He would have let others know his plans and taken more safety precautions. While his survival was a testament to his quick thinking and resourcefulness, Ralston became a vocal advocate for encouraging others to consider safety measures in wilderness environments. He stressed the importance of planning, communication, and caution, especially when venturing into remote areas where help could be hours or days away. Ralston's story also served as a catalyst for a larger conversation about the power of mental fortitude. His experience showed that survival is not just about having the right tools or resources, but about being mentally prepared to make difficult choices in life-threatening situations. Ralston's resolve to survive was a direct result of his mental strength, his willingness to accept his situation, and his determination to never give up, no matter how hopeless the situation seemed. Though his physical recovery took time, Ralston emerged from the ordeal not just as a survivor, but as a man with a deeper appreciation for life and the simple joys that many people often take for granted. He would go on to marry and have children, finding a new purpose in life after the trauma he had endured. His story, though marked by unimaginable suffering, ultimately became a tale of hope, renewal, and a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Ralston's survival story will forever be remembered as a powerful reminder of the will to live. His decision to amputate his own arm, an act of extreme courage and determination, became a defining moment in the story of human resilience. Aron Ralston, a man who once faced death in the remote canyons of Utah, showed the world that survival is not just about escaping physical danger, but about finding the strength to continue, even when the odds are insurmountable. Aron Ralston's story challenges us to think about the strength within us when facing life's toughest obstacles. His journey is a reminder that we have the power to overcome, to endure, and to rise above, no matter how dire the circumstances. Whether we're navigating a physical or emotional crisis, Ralston's incredible survival teaches us to never give up, to always keep moving forward, and to believe that, even in the darkest moments, we can find a way to survive. Let his example be a call to face challenges with resilience and courage, knowing that sometimes, survival is the greatest victory of all.